Hi, Nicole. Thank you for taking time to do this interview with Enterprise IT News. I'm Kat Yong. Um, and I understand that you're in India right now, but actually you're based in Canberra.
So I've just finished yesterday a critical infrastructure roundtable in partnership with the American Chamber of Commerce. We're doing a series around the region, but yeah, for every day I run the JPAC region, but I'm based out of Canberra in Australia, hence the sophisticated accent.
Mm. Okay. So sounds like critical infrastructure is your thing, your jam, your expertise, right? So and from the sound of it as well, you do travel around the region and you most probably have lots of conversations about critical infrastructure. How would you define critical information infrastructure? And especially in the context of Malaysia.
Critical information infrastructure, or I just say CI just because of the mouthful. But basically, it's kind of, you can look at it through three lenses. It's at that national security or nation state level, the government, the stuff that we need to do as a country. It's then at the sort of the company level or the citizen level. So things that make sure that we can go about our everyday lives.
So when critical infrastructure sectors like healthcare systems or financial services networks are successfully attacked, what are the cascading risks you foresee that governments should be concerned about?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, we've seen some pretty in our region some pretty high profile attacks,
Yeah.
and immediately for the company or the organisation impacted, it obviously impacts their services, their businesses. Importantly, it really affects their reputation and their trust that they've established with their government, or with their customers. I'm sorry, and then at that sort of cascading level, it we're an interconnected world. Everything we do, especially in ASEAN, it's cross-border, it's cross cooperation. And if those really significant, important, critical infrastructure entities are breached, it can kind of undermine that trust. So it really speaks to this day, that digitally interconnected world. And as companies, we now have a responsibility to take our critical infrastructure delivery really seriously.
Mhm. Are there any specific examples that come to mind, in terms of countries?
Also, Australia's also gone on the critical infrastructure legislation journey, a cybersecurity strategy. And a lot of that, the spotlight came about that from a very high profile telecommunications breach and a high profile private health insurance company.
Mhm.
So those two breaches saw virtually half of the Australian population's personal detail
Mhm.
released on the dark web. So, there was that kind of, it moved the conversation out of, say, the technical teams or even the board teams to if I use the Australian analogy, into the pubs sitting around. It was impacting, everyday citizens
Mhm.
talking about, oh my gosh, my personal data or my important data
Mhm.
has been breached.
Mhm.
So that was, so they sort of, sometimes, unfortunately, high profile incidents can cause government to respond. But then in the proactive way, I think, for example, in Malaysia, you've had the brilliancy to see what Singapore's done, what Australia's done, what some of the other leading nations have done around cybersecurity and critical infrastructure, and proactively brought in a legislative environment to help protect and uplift the country's resilience.
Mhm. I'd like to go back to the example you shared earlier, involving insurance and the other sector as well. You mentioned citizens,
Telecommunications, yeah.
telecommunications. Citizens were were sitting in pubs horrified about their personal data being out there. What did you observe in terms of fallout from the business and economy aspect?
The bottom line was impacted, reputations were impacted, and those companies have had to work very hard to mitigate and respond to customers' expectations that my data needs to be held securely. In also, it made a conversation around, at a government level, around a legislation level, around how we are mandated to store information. A lot of the customer data was very old, but there was a legislative requirement to keep that, like how you have to keep your tax records for a certain amount of time and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
And so there was a real conversation at the government level. Why are we mandating this storage of data? How is it being secured? And is it now a cybersecurity risk?
Mm.
And so it challenged and made the Australian government have to look at the way we look at data and how we secure data.
Speaking from the perspective of how to do better,
Yes.
how important is information sharing, regional cooperation, in defending a country's critical infrastructure, and practical challenges in implementation. What have your observations been?
Yeah, so look, we have worked with, what you would class as our competitors for a very long time around threat sharing, security best practice. In our sector, it's quite common for us, we're a member of, say, the Cyber Alliance, where we share best practice and what we're seeing from threat actors and criminal elements so that we can all uplift as a community. So, what we like to see from our customers, though, or our partners, is often because of that reputation risk, we sometimes see companies a little bit hesitant to actually say they've been breached or how they were breached.
Mm.
So there's a role there in legislation or governments to help provide a trusted forum to share those insights and share those what's happened,
Mm.
so that we can actually, as a community, as a cyber resilient country for Malaysia, or as a region, we can learn and improve. Unfortunately, the threat actors, both at a nation state and at a criminal level, are sharing, are
Yes.
working together more and more. So we also need to do that.
Mm. Talking about Malaysia's reporting requirements, I believe that we recently introduced a new piece of legislation, the Malaysian Cybersecurity Act, whereby there's now is probably obligatory now for certain industries that when they have been breached, to have to report about it to the regulatory body which they sit under
Yes.
within
Yes.
a certain time frame. Malaysia fine-tune it further, you feel, or
Look, I think,
any gaps
yeah.
that you see?
So I think the 2024 Cybersecurity Legislation Act is positive. Obviously, businesses can see it as a regulatory burden, but the experience that I've seen across the region in Singapore and Australia is that it enables our IT or our cybersecurity teams to have conversations at the board executive level,
Mhm.
showing how important good cybersecurity is.
Mhm.
So I actually think it's a great piece of legislation. Yes, there's risk and reporting requirements, especially, for the banking, water, power, those you've clearly defined what CIIs
Utilities.
are in the ledge.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it creates a onus on companies to prioritize cybersecurity, which obviously from a Palo Alto Networks perspective, we believe is an important step in ensuring trust and economic and national security. New to find out how we need to sort of adjust it. Companies are still getting their head around the requirements, still, going through the auditing, the risk processing. But like the Malaysian government is very open to those conversations around what business is seeing and what business is doing. But I think, she's only been in for a little while. So I think we need to see it go through the sort of the annual cycle
Mm-hmm.
to understand the impact a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. In your previous response as well, you mentioned the importance of having to the government, or at the government level at least, needing to create a trusted forum, and perhaps currently this is probably a very good stage for Malaysia or any country that is undergoing what Malaysia's is currently, to start to build that environment, a trusted forum. What do you think would be, some of the practical steps that governments like Malaysia can take to get this going?
We encourage at Palo Alto Networks a real sense of that private-public partnership. Unlike a lot of legislation that can roll out, cybersecurity is sitting in private business. It's not sitting just within the domain of government services or government bureaucrats or policymakers. So it is a slightly unique legislative delivery because you rely on private businesses uplifting. So we really would encourage more workshops, resilience, sort of like exercises where you bring both government and the sectors together to actually almost red team or practice what happens if something did happen. I do think there is an opportunity to increase that sort of continual risk cooperation and bringing in not just the actual companies impacted, but organisations like Palo Alto Networks who bring that subject matter expertise and importantly, that global lens. One of the benefits about being, the largest cybersecurity company in the world and having people like me around the world is that we can help bring those global insights and, the best practices to the table. And I think that's where it would be really exciting to continue to work with the Malaysian government around that.
Mm. It's really interesting from your response. It seems to indicate that the private sector has to spearhead this. Would that be correct?
I think it's a mutual obligation. It can't just be a government responsibility. Governments can set the sort of frameworks and the guardrails, but it's up to the private business to adjust and to improve their cyber security posture.
Let's put another lens onto this. Shared responsibility between customers and cloud providers. Especially when it comes to from the cybersecurity aspect, a breach occurs.
Yeah,
So
I think
there's
it.
tension there, I think.
Yeah, I from a Palo Alto perspective, I we would approach any sort of vendor, customer, partner, delivery partnership the same in the sense of looking at your cybersecurity posture through, for us it's a platformization approach now where you understand your attack surface exposure. You have a consolidation of your cybersecurity providers so that because the complexity is so big. So I think regardless of what sector or what customer, the framework and the approach should be the same.
When I go to cybersecurity conferences, like one of the topics that does come up, is about when it comes to securing the premises, when it comes to securing data or the sorts of an organization, there could
Yep.
be the service provider who is cloud-based, right? A cloud service provider, and then there could be the customer, and both of them are pointing fingers at each other when something goes wrong,
Yeah, look,
and
that's that supply chain understanding where your vulnerabilities are, who's responsible, and ensuring that you have very clear guidelines on who does what. Um, you know, we saw that in those high breaches, profile breaches I referenced at the start of our conversation. It was actually, a third party that opened the door for the hackers to get into the telco. So yes, it's an easy game to kind of blame that third party, but at the end of the day, you should be able to see your attack surface environment. You should understand where your partners or suppliers sit within your cybersecurity sort of frameworks, and then ensure that you have mechanisms to keep each other sort of honest about your expectations. I think it also, Kat, interestingly speaks to, you know, at the end of the day, it, we can do that. We obviously can protect the crown jewels to the very best of our ability. But if they do get in, and with the use of AI and the rapid, the good guys are using AI, but also the bad guys. It's also about looking at cybersecurity through a resilience lens. So if they do get in, how quickly does it take you to detect them, and how long does it take you to respond?
Hmm.
So, as a policymaker for Palo Alto Networks, we're very much talking to governments and our customers about mean time to detect and mean time to respond.
Okay. So this is the perhaps the focus that Palo Alto is taking, with the platform-based solutions that you have. But
Yes.
I would like to zoom into something which you said about needing to know what is in your environment, kind of having visibility, observability, and kind
Yeah.
of like an inventory of what is in your environment,
Yeah.
so that the division of responsibility between the vendor and the customer can be it's more measurable, it's clearer, it's more clear cut, right? That was what you seem to be saying as well, I think.
Exactly. And I think the critical infrastructure, that legislative approach has really turned the spotlight on that. Because if you have to do audits and risk filings to the Malaysian government around your cybersecurity posture, you need to understand all your endpoints, especially critical infrastructure. So understanding that is really important.
Hmm.
And we call that understanding your attack surface management sort of surface.
Hmm.
Traditionally, what we've seen is because cybersecurity has been an afterthought sometimes, Kat.
Yeah.
We've built this fantastic new product, or we've built this fantastic new factory. Oh my goodness, we've got to secure it now. Whereas, we're seeing now secure by design, or,
Yeah.
companies immediately when you have a great idea,
Hmm.
let's put security at the forefront of that.
Yes, please.
So we're going from, some organizations can have 60, 70, 80 different vendors and products, and the poor IT teams or the cybersecurity teams are going, exploding with complexity and logistics. And whereas we're saying platformization, let's bring it back down, let's simplify it, let's have one sort of plane of glass, for a simple analogy, of understanding where you sit,
Yeah.
and how many access points you have, for example, to the internet. And from a an advocacy point of view, it's governments are really getting their head around the complexities, but how can we actually mitigate that through secure by design and the systems that we talk about.
All hail the platform. All right. So, loving this conversation so far. Final question from me. Looking ahead, right? What's the most critical action Malaysia needs to take right now to strengthen its security posture against emerging AI-powered threats? And how can it leverage regional partnerships to do this?
A simple
Thoughts?
question, Kat. Thanks.
Multi-layered.
Yeah. Look, look. I think Malaysia needs to be applauded for the, as the chair of the ASEAN, this year, you've really the government has really lent into being the leader in cybersecurity. It's really put it on the agenda as a key priority for ASEAN, and recognizing that there are certain countries in our region that their cybersecurity footprint is quite low.
Yeah.
And it speaks to their whole digital transformation. And there are other countries who are quite sophisticated. And there's a recognition by Malaysia that we need to lift everyone up. If the region is not secure, it's going to make Malaysia vulnerable. If Singapore's not, so it's that real ASEAN cooperation lens, which
Mm.
Malaysia has really led, and I think they need to be applauded for it. My If they were listening to me, if I was sitting in front of, the Minister for Digital Transfer, digital, I'd say continue to do what you do, continue to have the conversations, but ensure that you bring that private public partnership into it. A Palo Alto network stands ready to help you bring, as I said, those insights. Ensure that we're bringing Malaysian companies to the table to have that trusted private public conversation because we're part of the solution.
Mhm.
We're part of the partnership. And that's hard to do. It takes time and effort, but we would just call for more of that trusted partner
Mm.
engagement.
Very profound message for our Minister of Digital, Mr. Gobind Dio. Uh,
Yeah, what a
Action
gr-
item.
yes. Yes, I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times, but I dare not tell him what to do. He is the minister, but we can always suggest, can't we?